Welcome to Accounting High. When I first started writing a book, it was really just a passion project. I remember when I was reading Chicken Soup for the Soul, they're like Chicken Soup for the Soul for dogs lover, for women, for teachers, like whatever, right? I'm like, where is the one for accountants? Let me write one.
And that's what you wrote.
That's what I wrote. And I wanted to be a love letter to accountants. It's directly to accountants. A lot of accountants who do great work, they're not proud of being an accountant. It is such a shame. But I really want people to think deeper about their contribution, the impact and mission, the purpose of what it means to be an accountant. And I really want them to be proud because I think it's the energy, like a vibe. And you just hate your job, not proud of your profession. How do you even promote the profession? I think there's a group of people who are like yourself, innovative and creative. But I think majority of it is still pretty slow in change. We still have a long way to go in the profession.
May I have your attention, please?
Welcome to Accounting High. It's freshman year at a brand new school. Here, we have no rules in place as we're on a mission to set our own traditions. So hang tight and learn with us as we grow. At Accounting High, you can expect to gain knowledge in a completely different way than what you may be used to, with some fun and oftentimes colorful conversations involving some of the best teachers in the accounting industry. Whether you loved high school or you hated it, here's your chance to be a part of an unforgettable experience redone. While you're here, don't forget to follow us on Spotify or subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you may be listening to us right now so you don't miss out on any new episodes. And feel free to leave us a 5-star review letting us know how the school year is treating you. In addition, share this episode on social media, tagging us at Accounting High. So sit back, relax, and open your mind because class is in session.
I repeat, may I have your attention, please?
This is another public service announcement brought to you in part
By Accounting High.
The views and events expressed here are
Of the next generation of accounting and tech professionals leading this space.
the events and suggestions are not to be taken lightly. Children should not partake in the listening
Of this podcast.
anything else.
Yeah.
So without further ado, introducing the star of our show.
Scotty and Cece.
We're gonna have a problem here.
Class is in session. I wanted to say our nicknames on here, but my nickname now is Scotty. I got a lot of nicknames. I'm not going to go into all those. We got Cecilia. Cece is what you go by. Ling?
Leung, yeah.
Is that how you pronounce it? Lung or Ling?
Leung.
Lung, okay. Lung. Cece's coming to us from, where are you coming to us from?
New York City.
New York City. All right.
Yes.
For some reason I thought California, but I know that's because you went to Berkeley, but that's just what I associate as. I'm in my basement again. You're at your house in New York. I'll be in New York next week, actually.
Wow.
So, but Cece, introduce yourself for our guests. I know, we've been talking for a few months. I got to know you through when I was working with Earmark, when I was doing some work there, and we hit it off our first conversation. We've been chatting ever since. You sent me a copy of your book. I want to talk about that. And I was just really excited to have you on. So we had a little bit of scheduling issues for the past couple months, but now we finally are connected. We're here.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. And I really like what you guys are doing. Well, like what you do is so cool, the whole rapper thing. Like, usually when people think about accounting, it's, they have all these like crazy stereotype. But I think there's a lot of like brilliant mind, creativity, fun stuff that we can do and talk about, right? Which is so exciting for me to be on here to talk to you. So a little bit about me.
We're going to have fun this episode for sure.
Oh, yeah. So excited. So, yeah, a little bit about me. So I am the co-founder of the global advisory firm called the Entrepreneur CFO. So we're based in New York City, and we are a women-owned advisory firm that help growing companies to build a strong foundation and infrastructure, just so they don't have to have huge reliance on the founders. So a little bit about my background. So before I start my own company, I spent 20 years in corporate. So I worked for some of the prominent firms like JP Morgan, PwC, EY all over the world. And then after that, I worked for a startup, build startup. But all these times, I actually always had a side hustle. So, like when COVID hit, a lot of things changed. So that was just a perfect time to transition my side hustle to a full-time business. So yeah, I mentioned I'm currently in New York City. I have been here for almost 18 years now. So I was originally from Hong Kong. So I moved to Canada when I was 16 years old. And then after I graduated, I just like kind of all over the place. But New York City always felt right to me. I always loved it here. It's always been my home.
So Hong Kong to Canada. Mm-hmm. Why the move to Canada?
Oh my God, it was such a long history. So everybody probably know now, like back in the day. So Hong Kong was a colony of British. And, like in 1997, British supposed to give Hong Kong back to China. So a lot of people are just very frightened, insecure about the future. So my parents included. So they weren't really just thinking about themselves. They're thinking about, their kids. So me and my brother. And so, that I always knew at some point we will leave Hong Kong, but we just didn't know when. So, and I think, so when I was 16 years old, like it was just the right time and we just moved.
And were you in high school then?
I was in high school. Yep.
Okay. This being accounting high, I always want to trigger root foundation back to high school for everybody. So that's interesting. Because honestly, I didn't even know that. I mean, I don't know a lot, and that's one of the things I didn't know, that Hong Kong was a British colony, and England or British decided to give it back to China. Was it like an expiration, or what was the reason?
Yeah, so basically during wartime, I think like China just had to to keep it really short. So China just gave Hong Kong like a piece of the really valuable land to the UK, and then they said, we'll give you this land for 100 years. So you have to give it back in 1997. So Hong Kong at the time was just like a fisherman. So a lot of fishermen, it was really nothing. But when the UK took it over, and they really like built the economy. So for those of us who grew up in Hong Kong, like we had this sense of pride because we're westernized. And at the time, China was just very underdeveloped. So everybody was like, we didn't want to be that. Like, we want to be westernized. We wanted to be powerful, kind of all that. I felt like a lot of people just had that identity crisis.
Well, sure. Because you're almost identifying with the Western world, but still part of, like, Hong Kong is still seen as, I've always seen as part of China. So, but it's always been somewhat separate from China too. I just didn't know the history of that. So, but your identity, that's interesting too, because you spent most of your almost all of your adult life since high school in the Western world, Canada or US. How do you identify like as yourself? Do you still like a China or?
That was an interesting question, right? Because I think a lot of people ask me that, and I always took pride in that. Like I had the best of both worlds. Because even when we grew up in Hong Kong, like with a lot of westernized influence, but at home, we're still very traditional. We grew up with Asian values, like respect elderlies and do good in school, and your success is defined by how well you do in academic, professional life, and all that kind of stuff.
Work ethic.
Yeah. And so I think that's actually a really good thing, to instill a lot of discipline and structure in our life. But I think with that, it lacks creativity. It doesn't really, like that kind of environment, just because it's always very hectic. When you look at like Asian kids, I think it's still like that today, if not worse already. Their schedule is like jam-packed. So you go to like piano lessons, swimming lessons, and then you have like tons of homework, and then you're involved in like a billion things, right? So I feel like sometimes it's just, again, like I think the structure and discipline is good, but then in that environment, it's just very stressful. It doesn't really quite encourage any creativity, innovations, right? And so that's why I said, right? So it was a good age for me to, like at 16, be able to almost like expand my world to see something different then I was like, wow, it almost opened up my eyes to like a completely whole different, bigger world.
I love that you brought in the creativity, because that was my next bridge to this was in the accounting world. We're so focused on the numbers and so focused on, especially, people who do tax and do traditional accounting, bookkeeping. We're so focused on how it's supposed to be that we don't allow much time to create. And I think that's I'm in the middle of a transition of like, I've always been in the accounting world, but now I consider myself more creative and a creator, or not a creative, but I consider more of less like, I enjoy the creative aspects of all this more than just the root learning and repetitiveness of that day to day, like the nature of the business. So I think a lot of business owners get to flex the creativity in their brands, in their companies, in their cultures, and being able to understand the difference of those. Like there's a difference between, I talked about this with somebody on a recent episode, or the difference between productivity and creativity. There's a big difference between those two, and they don't necessarily intersect, because creativity, you need that open space. And if you're filling your days with piano lessons and violin lessons and, extracurricular activities and all of that, you don't have any time to create. So really all you're doing is memorizing and learning how to do somebody else's, if it's piano or if it's violin, whatever it might be, you're just learning how to read and perform it. You're not learning really how to create, or maybe you are. I mean, I just think that there's not enough time to do that.
Yeah, there's just not enough time and space or opportunities, right? We so often talk about opportunities, but then I think it was just very much, when I think about how I grew up, I felt like everything was like a script, right? Everybody just kind of execute this script that our parents, lay out perfectly for us. And I felt like, but I always wanted to, attribute my success to my parents, because, when I think about where we came from as a family, so my parents actually came from low income family. And so, they're the eldest of their family. So they work really hard and ultimately get themselves in the middle class. But I think, when we were born, we, as in me and my brother, when we were born, we were actually still, poor or low income. But my parents saved every dime and put us into these prestigious private school, because they want us to have opportunity, But at the same time, it was actually really tough. And of course, so here's the kind of conflicts, right? So as young kids, we just didn't fit in to, we grew up with the rich people, but we didn't have these Hello Kitty bags like, these my classmates have. So you often felt like you're not enough, you didn't fit in, right? But then of course at home, my parents are like, that's not what we send you there for. We send you there to get the best education, just so you can change your life. Right? So it was like contradicting. It's like, I didn't want to be there. But then because we were so young, right? Of course, we didn't see, in hindsight, I saw exactly the intention. But then when you're a young kid, you just wanted to be normal, fit in. And
you're in the moment. And
yeah.
In the Western world too. I mean, everybody's considering different. I mean, they're in the moment, they're all talking about and doing different things than what what you were at your home. I'm sure there was a pretty big contrast between being at home and then being in the classroom with your friends or with your classmates. So that dichotomy of, I guess that's how you start forming your identity. Those are the formative years of our life, is like from 16 to 19 to 20. Those years form really who we are. Like, I think to a degree, we're born who we are, who we're going to be through our parents. They know us best. They know what's best for us. But then through our own eyes and who we want to become is usually during those years of growing up, high school. That's also why I like bringing back this whole metaphor of accounting high, because that's where a lot of us have like our strongest memories, whether it's, whether we loved high school or hated it. That's, what defined who we are as people now. We always go back to some of those memories and some of those moments.
Oh, yeah.
So tell me a little bit of a defining moment of when you decided you wanted to work in this space too. Was it during those years, during the private school years, or?
So I grew up in Hong Kong, and then, I actually didn't, I tried really hard to keep up with my grades and everything, but it was just very competitive. And so I mentioned in my book, when I was in grade 5, like I failed math, right? That instantly, oh my God, that was like almost like at that time, I thought that was my life was over, right? In school, you almost get people just hate me. The teacher called me out. It's like, oh my God, like you're like lazy, you pull down the average. And I understand, right? Because that's kind of the culture. People are so cutthroat and, and in their eyes, of course, it is legit. But then I was just a young kid. So basically, I was put in that no one cares category, right? So for a couple years that I really just kind of gave up. I was just like, whatever, like didn't care about my grades anymore, and I didn't know what to do. But deep down, I knew that we would move to Canada or, to the US or UK. Like we didn't know at the time. We just know that we would leave. And then from what other people told me, it's a completely different world. So I was waiting. I was hoping for that opportunity to come. So when I actually moved to Canada when I was 16 years old, it opened up a completely new world to me. So, I mean, it wasn't easy because there's still, because I spoke pretty broken English at the time. I mean, and we learn English in Hong Kong as a second language. But when you don't speak it every day, it's completely different, right? It's like people here learn Spanish. So all of a sudden, you're in this country, and I was also very shy. I'm always very shy. So I was so afraid to speak, afraid that when people hear my accent, they would judge me. They knew that I was fresh off the boat, right? And so so I think like kids made fun of me or whatever. But then I think later on, I just kind of turned this because I had to remember, my parents worked so hard for us to move us across the country for a better life, better opportunities, better future. So that became my purpose and almost reasons to do well. So I think, okay, so talk about our cultural expectation, right? I mentioned our success formula is basically laid out for us. So it's either you start businesses or become professional. So at the time, starting businesses is not even something that I knew how or would ever imagine in my life. So, okay, I could work hard to become a professional. So you think about your choices, right? It's actually very limited. You can be a doctors, lawyers, engineers, accountants. So I thought, okay, yeah, business can be interesting. Everybody, there's a lot of money to be made. I wanted to know more. And I asked around, I think I went to the school counselor. And they're like, well, are you good at math? Oh my God, it was such a nightmare, right? I'm like, no. And then I don't even remember how. So I actually didn't pick accounting. I took an accounting course and actually hated it because the debits and credit was just so boring, right? So I went to college. And studied business. So my degree was actually in economic and finance. And when I graduated, I was so frightened. Like, I didn't know what I wanted to do, completely clueless. And then someone, probably my parents too, many people was like, you should just get a CPA. It'll be a great tool. It'll be a great designation under your tool belt. It complements like what you do in business, and it'll open up a lot of opportunities. I'm like, okay, yeah, whatever. It's just like it took the exam because it looks good on a resume while I was still figuring out what to do. But I was so glad that I did that because it did open up a lot of opportunities. And honestly, even till today, I think that was the best choice. One of the best choices in my life is to get my CPA or become an accountant.
Well, tell me about that, though, because you didn't like math, you didn't like accounting, but somebody suggested get your CPA, and you said, okay. Like, that doesn't track for me. What was the really, I mean, I guess for the opportunity, but at some point, did something change? Was there other options that you just didn't see as viable, or?
I was very clear that I wanted to get into business. Like, I want to become a professional. So, I could
what's
teach.
the language of business?
Exactly, right? Yes. So then people are like, okay, then the next step is, again, we have a script, right? What is the next step? You get into the Big Four. Why do you get into the Big Four? Because they have the best of everything. Well, that's what we were told, right? And I think they do have a lot to offer, absolutely, right? Because they have all the big clients. That's where you see business. Doing audit in different aspects, you really see the many aspects and ins and outs of business. So I admit that was supposed to be a good training.
The CPA was for business. That was for business purpose. And I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but you went to EY right out of college. Is that right?
Well, I initially didn't know what I wanted to do, so I didn't want to join the Big Four because people have been telling me like they're working 24/7. There's like no life. Like some people got sick, and all this horror story, right? I was like, okay, that's it. Couldn't even imagine myself doing that, right? I was freaking out, just like many young kids today are, right? When they told me about when they see their future. So I was like, okay, I don't want to do that. And then I was just applying everywhere. I kind of wanted to get into banking, right? And then I actually went into like all these investment banker recruitment session and all that kind of stuff. Oh my God, it just remind me of these like girls' school that I went to, super competitive. People was like almost just wanted to kick you to the curb or something like that, right? I was like, oh my God. And that's not the environment I wanted to be in. So anyways, long story short, I came across this opportunity in a mutual funds company. So I thought, okay, I didn't know what that is, but hey, it seems like it's growing. You want to be in a growing field, right? And so I thought, okay, maybe I'll learn something. I knew nothing at the time anyway. So I was like, okay, yeah, that could be interesting. So I just joined them and do accounting. And the best thing about that is, first of all, again, like I just graduated, I really like knew nothing. So, and then they have this like 6 weeks training program. You went to Boston, they trained you in different areas. So back then, we're talking about 20 years ago now, like, I graduated in 2003. So, oh my God, it has been 20 years. So back then, they offer a lot more. You have mentors, like you sit with people to learn different aspects, compliance, legal, and so many things. So it was very eye-opening, and I actually liked it. So that's how I got into the industry. And then, of course, I was there for 18 months, and then things just become so competitive. I asked myself, okay, this could not be my life, right? I had a lot of good experience and skills. What is next, right? So I started asking that question. And the people told me, well, you're from Hong Kong, China is blooming, like you should go back, you speak the language. So I speak Mandarin and also speak Cantonese, so they're like, yeah, you should really take advantage of it. So at first, again, like secretly, I was just like, I didn't want the Big Four experience, given all these horror stories I've heard, right? But I was like, I was only 20 something, let's give it a try. Worst come worse, I could always leave. So that's exactly what I did. Moved back to Hong Kong, joined E&Y, and they sent me to China. And there was a lot of China doing IPO. So that was actually really eye-opening experience for me. But 1 year is really enough. I didn't want to do it for a lifetime either.
Well, and I think that's it also, like you speak a lot of languages. You speak the language of business. You speak the Mandarin, Cantonese, English. And this is also one of those like hero's journeys where you're going back home to reflect on who you are too. I'm sure during those 2 years, you also learned just a lot about who you were going back to living in China again, living in Hong Kong again. Too.
Yeah, and it's really funny because when I went back, people would just assume that because like I'm Asian, like that was supposed to be easier. Because a lot of people was like, yeah, it's so hard for you to get promoted in North America.
But by that point, you were Americanized or even Canadian in a lot of ways too, right?
I would think so, but I think, I spent 16 years in Hong Kong, so I felt like there's still deep Asian side of me there. So I think that's what I always said, right? I think I'm like a blend of the best of everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think a little bit of both. Yeah, I think so. And so yeah, I went back, and people just assume that I would fit right in, but I actually didn't. There was a lot of things that were just like very foreign to me. And yeah, okay, speaking the language has advantage, but the cultural shock, again, like I felt like even when I moved from Canada to the US, I had a culture shock. Like initially I thought it shouldn't be, right? Like Canada and US supposed to be friends, like next to each other, like supposed to be similar. Oh God, no. So yeah, same thing as when I was in China. I just felt like it took me a while. I wasn't really thinking, and also, at that time, at that age, based on how I was raised, my focus wasn't to find a career path or find my purpose or whatever. I just wanted to be established. I just want to follow this script. I'm supposed to have a couple of years in Big Four, then switch to the industry, and then get married, have kids, blah, blah, blah. Oh, actually, there's more. So get married and have kids, and then stay home and have a second career. backup career. We always have a backup career, right? So what is a backup career?
You got your side hustles.
Oh, yeah, exactly. So then I can teach my piano. All these years that I've learned, now we can finally use these things and make money, right? And again, I don't think what we were taught was wrong, like who doesn't want a stable life? So our parents taught us to be responsible, take care of ourselves, take care of our family. So, okay, that was right. But how about really living a life? Never really talk about that.
I love to talk about that because that's part of that journey of finding ourselves too. And I don't think we ever truly know what we want because that always evolves. That always changes. I feel like in a lot of ways, I followed a script up until a certain point, and then COVID upended that. And then I went back to what I always wanted to do. And that's talk, and, like do this, like do the rap stuff. So I guess let's keep going with your journey though. So you ended up back in New York, and that's where you stayed pretty much. Did you go to UK for a little while too?
Yes, I did, but through...
Which that completes the journey for you because you've got the UK connection with Hong Kong. You went to Canada, you went to California, then New York, and then back to UK, and then back to New York?
Yes, that really hit all the global location that I wanted to hit. That really does complete what I said.
Those are some of the best ones, though, right? Like if you're going to go anywhere in the U.S., it's California, it's L.A. or that area, California and New York, right? Like that's...
Yeah. Well, so I went to a lot of international assignment when I was at JP Morgan. So they sent me to like Switzerland, London. So that was like, I had a blast. But initially, I thought I would... Well, it's actually really funny. Initially, when I moved to New York, just like many people, they felt like this is going to be just a short stint, right? Like a year or two, had it on your resume. You can tell people, hey, I made it to New York, but I decided to move home. It's just like so fancy to say. And so I thought, yeah, the same for me. Like, I could give it a try for a year and then two. I did leave in 2008, the financial crisis. I just got so burned out, and like I didn't get fired. But here's the thing: it actually wasn't a good thing, right? People was like, "Oh, that's good, you still have a job." No, it wasn't good because they fired everyone else. I ended up doing like 2 to 3 people's job. Like how could you not get burned out? That's crazy. So.
And this was when you were at PwC or at
RBC, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I stayed at PwC for 2 years and then I left because I had my 3 years under my belt. That was the plan. And I just couldn't see myself becoming a partner, manager. Actually, that was always the plan. I wanted to switch because once you jumped out from, I don't know about now, but back then, when you leave the Big Four and go into industry, you get like 30% raise, right? It was a big deal. So I was like, yeah, that's it. I was willing to put in my 3 years, got aged like probably 10 years older. But yeah, that was worth it. And so, finally you had a life come to when you moved from public accounting to work in a bank. So that was exactly what I set out to do. And then 2008 hit. And then I had a good boss who hired me, but then that guy actually got laid off. And then plus most of his team. So I was like, just felt like an orphan. And then there's so much like politics going on because, and I understand, right, in hindsight, because everybody was frightened. So everybody was fighting and it was just terrible, dark times. And I'm sure I'm not the only buddy, right? Like I'm pretty sure that was a lot of people experience. And at the time, when it first happened, it's not like this time. Like I feel like this time around COVID, a lot of people kind of like myself who are older, like we've been through it the very first time, 2008. So now it kind of... I was more alert. I was always more prepared because we know this kind of thing might happen. Then what were you going to do?
Sure. Well, and you had a lot of self-actualization, or just your journey has been not traditional, but almost traditional considering our generation is a lot different than the generations before us. That was, you go to school, you get a job, you stay there, you get your pension, you retire, and then you retire, right? Like, I don't think we see that the same way. I think the 2 to 3 year stint everywhere is almost more common among people that I talk to around our age and even younger than it was in the generations before us. And then you're continually evolving. as each job goes, this isn't a bad thing anymore to have all of these different positions. And when people are hired now, they almost know that you may only get 2 years out of somebody. 2 good years is better than nothing, too. I mean, that's what I'm seeing now. I hired a guy 3 years ago, and he just put in his notice, and I kind of expected that when we hired him in the first place. Like, we'd get a good 3 years out of him. I think that's also plays into eventually, you do find your place, and I want to get to that. I want to take us through your journey, continue, but I also want to see. I'm just going to ask you now. Then, now, do you feel like you know what you want to do, or are you still in that journey?
Wow, I can confidently say that I'm at the best at where I am in my career, but I think this is just the beginning. So I think the best is yet to come,
That's
as
it,
people
right
say.
There. Just the beginning, yes. And I hear that from the best of the best, and they always say that. It doesn't matter where they are in their journey. They always feel like they're just getting started, and they have that fire. And you may not have said that as you're working through all these companies, but you said early on, like, you either become a professional or you start a business, and you were trying to be a professional this whole time. Through your whole journey for almost 20 years, you were trying to become a professional, and it never fit. You never found that perfect Goldilocks fit of a professional, and let's just keep going with the journey. So you ended up at a lot of different companies. So just give me the highlights too. Let's keep going.
Yeah, so basically, I talk about in the book too, but, in 2008, just, I know a lot of people sometimes try to fight the corporate politics, try to fit in and all that. I think, it doesn't matter as kids or as adults, like we often, like we're human beings. We want to fit in, of course, right? But sometimes I feel like it's just impossible when there's a toxic culture. But then at the time, like I said, I was so young, I didn't know what to do, and there's no one would tell me what to do. I actually went to a bookstore and tried to find a book that tell me how to, combat these crazy stuff going on, because I really need help. And then of course they tell you how to play politics, and I think I actually tried, and I hated myself backstabbing other people, because I was like, if other people got backstabbed, then the focus would not be on me. Like, yeah, just talk about something else, like someone else. I was exhausted. But then later on, like I said, I did it for a while.
Well, when you try to be something that you're not, that is exhaustive. Like, if you can be yourself 100, you're almost energized. The more energized, the more work you do, and the more that you can help people. But when you're trying to do something that your body is telling you not to, or your mind, your heart, your soul is telling you not to do, it wears on you. That's how you get burnt out, doing the things that you don't want to do.
Oh yeah, like people so often, it's such a contradiction, right? People sometimes ask me now, like I get this question a lot, right? How many hours do you work? I'm like, well, I don't know, but I don't feel like I'm working. Like a lot of stuff, talking to my clients to talk about business, I think it's so much fun. It energizes me so much. Like, that's not work. Okay, so sometimes when I'm like at home, like thinking about
that.
Right? When you like go out for a walk and think about problem, is that work? Well, no, it's pretty, like a lot of these things is pretty interesting to me. And then, I also volunteer, like low-income and immigrant kids, right? I teach them ESL and stuff. I see them grow. I talk to them. That was so much, like, fulfilling. And I just love the thing. And people was like, oh, my God, you're already so busy. How do you still work all the time? I'm like, I don't feel like I'm working all the time, Yeah, and
you've already been through what you consider work all the time. And this is a contrast to that.
Oh, yeah, that was work. Exactly, right. Yeah. So, and I felt that at the time, it was just in surviving mode, right? Because again, everybody was so, like I was talking about back in 2008, everybody was so scared and everybody backstabbing everybody. So I always see I never see work it's challenging, but it's never, like, it's always something that you can figure out. It's a people connection. Things get really complicated and kind of frustrate me a lot, I felt. So, yeah, so long story short, so I got so burned out. I was just like, okay, That's it. Like, this is it. I want out. And then, like, it was never really me because, you know, how we were taught is that you just always push through, you know, like, because you're not going to give up on these things. So it was actually, so I at the time, I didn't tell anybody why I moved back to Hong Kong. I just said, you know, I told everybody this, right? I told everybody, well, the US economy wasn't good. Now it's time to come home. But meanwhile, like, no one knows the truth. So I went back home, stayed there for, well, actually, I went to Canada first. That's another longer story, right? But, and then I went back to Hong Kong. So there was 9 months that I tried to look for a job. But at the same time, I was actually pretty depressed, right? Because all the stuff didn't work out. I thought that was, again, like, I thought that was the end of my career, and that couldn't be. You know, it was going so
you've been
well.
running and constantly moving forward, and then that'll catch up to you too. If you're running towards something, you know, it didn't look like you were running away from something, but if you're running towards something and you just don't see any light at the end of that tunnel, that's exhaustive as well. That'll probably burn you out more than anything else.
It was, yeah, it was just a lot of things, right? Like I said, the guy who hired me got laid off, and then a lot of people got laid off, and then the one that's left just hated me, right? And I'm pretty sure they didn't hate me, right? But it was just like fear.
Well, it's your perception of it, whatever it might be.
Yeah. So, and so, you know, it was just a lot of things. It was just not an environment. But then I went back to Hong Kong. I was like, okay, maybe I should just find a job here. But deep down, I knew that I didn't like Hong Kong. So I went to a lot of different interviews, like all these prominent firms or whatever, right? Didn't get second interview. And everybody's feedback was like, we don't think you want to be here. And I was like, no, of course I do. Then I was like, okay, I need to try a little bit harder, right? Actually practice my smile, practice be like, you know, just practice to want to, but still doesn't work. No one want to hire me. And so
you can't lie to yourself, though. You're practicing your smile. You're practicing trying to convince yourself that you want to be something and be somewhere that you don't like, and other people can see that in your face. Like that's kind of like that's the language right there. Is your facial expressions and your actions speak louder than your words. You can't convince yourself. I mean, you're not an actress, so you were trying, but yeah, keep going though.
I think that's a great point. Though, like, so often we really try to be someone we're not, and it just ended up just. Yeah, it wasn't good. And I think, you know, again, long story short, 9 months, just like I realized I need to make a choice. So I think ultimately I just realized, you know, like I do love New York. Like I did, and I do love New York. You know, I thrived there. That was the highlight of my career, right? So maybe I should give it a try again. I actually missed it a lot. So then I was like, okay.
Sounds like John Lennon. John Lennon loved New York too, and that was the highlight of his career. Maybe the Beatles was the highlight of his career. I just always think of that, like, you know.
Oh wow! I think New York probably.
Shirt. I mean, they make bumper stickers, shirts. Everybody loves New York when they're in it.
I think that's probably a lot of people's highlight. Like, this place is so crazy, but I still, like, you know, still love it. You know, I love the energy and love the hustle and bustle. But yeah, so. Anyway, so I kind of decided like either way, if I stay where I was, continue to stay where I was and be miserable, it was really comes down to a choice, right? But either way is pretty frightening. So pick something. So I was like, okay, let's pick to go back to New York. And I just started applying for jobs. And then, you know, at the time I didn't have any money. I actually was like pretty much in debt. And so I went back to Canada, stayed in Canada. And of course, I went back to Canada, and I keep taking buses to New York to interview, and then stay in these like crazy places that, oh my God. But ultimately made it work, made it back to New York. So I think it was, I don't know, I think I grew up a little bit, but still something that I didn't think it through. In terms of exactly what I want, but I just want to get back on track, which is what I did. And
you did get back on track. Yet so this was 2 5-year stints as well. It was the longest you've been anywhere. From going from in Hong Kong, you were there for 5 years, and then now the next company you worked for in New York, that was another 5 years, right?
Yeah, so I was at RBC, and then 2008 went back to Hong Kong, and I stayed there for 9 months, right? No job. But then I was doing a lot of a lot of these odd jobs, right, just to make some money. So I was substituting for administrative assistant, teaching classes here and there. Really just wanted to make some money and felt useful, but didn't just kind of pause there. But then so I went back to New York, 2010, and I joined JP Morgan, and I was there for 5 years. I think 4 or 5 years. That was the longest career I had. And that's also where I did a lot of international travel.
So, and that's, I guess it takes you to the point of all of this has been a learning journey, and all of this is careers to make money, and yet you're still struggling to find who you are and what you want to do. So was it not, I mean, what was the final point where you decided I'm going to write a book?
I think I got this question a lot, right? And I always just felt, I told people when I was young, when I moved to Canada, I read a lot of Chicken Soup for the Soul. And I felt like, wow, it was so good. And I love hearing other people's journey and all that stuff. But then I don't think that was my reason. Because many people love Chicken Soup for the Soul, and no one really just write a book, right? So, but I think, the deeper reason really is that, I talk about, I kind of got into accounting by accident. But that's really has been one of the best choice I've made in my life, because it did open up a lot of opportunities, right? We, in the profession, we don't talk enough about how important and how valuable is to know numbers, right? And I feel like, so I really wanted to, first of all, I know a lot of amazing accountants, but I feel like when you think about accountants, first of all, there's a lot of misunderstanding exactly what we do. There's a lot of misconceptions, stereotypes, right? And also in the media, how often do we get the spotlight? You hear all these professions, you see legal drama, Silicon Valley or police, the Chicago PD. Where's Chicago accountants? Maybe not yet, right? There's nothing like that really humanize accountants. And so, and you can see it in people's face too, right? And sometimes people ask you what do you do? And then so you tell them, well, yeah, I'm an accountant, I'm a CPA. Then they start, what's the next question? They start asking you tax advice.
Can you do my taxes?
I know.
They ask you a tax question.
Right away. Or some people, and then you tell them, well, that's not what I do. And then instantly you get this silence. Or
they just get bored. It's everybody's story.
Oh,
everybody.
My God, right? It's do you even know what we do? There's really brilliant minds out there who are accountants, right? Who are busting fraud, inventing accounting system, doing all these amazing things. No one ever talked about that, right? And then...
Well, you know what I lead with now? I have a podcast and I rap for accountants. And that's a conversation starter. People do want to talk about that. If I just said I had an accounting firm, they just...
Yeah. And so I think it's just I wanted to do accountants some justice, because I think we do amazing work. But then also, I think there's a lot, when you think about, because I mentor a lot of young kids as well. So often, I think, first of all, when you think about college class, maybe high school too, right? When we take the very first class in accounting, it was all debits and credits. Okay, don't get me wrong. I mean, that's probably the most important foundational. Oh my God, it has turned off so many talents away. People take that, it's never again. That's it. And I was in one of the accounting society, was talking to someone, because, apparently, as we know, the pipeline issue is huge. And it's not recent, right? It's been for decades. And people just don't want to get into accounting. So I'm worried that someday if we don't do something, we might not even have the industry, right? And so I was okay, so I brought out a question. I'm why is the first class has to be, I know it's always been done that way, but why does it have to be talk about debits and credits? Why can't we talk about stories, right? Like the amazing work that we do, the impact that we have in business, individuals' life, maybe the world, right? It actually, when you think about, I think, people sometimes like to talk about these fraud cases, and it's very real, right? Like you have to rely on accountants to solve these cases. You don't rely on like lawyers. I don't think they can balance their checkbook, some of them. You know what I mean? And if you bust a fraud, like it actually save many people's lives. That kind of thing, right? We don't talk about. I think if we talk about that kind of stuff, it really lightens. It really inspire kids to be like, oh my God,
We
I
have
want
to make accounting sexy.
Yes.
That was the title of one of my episodes. I remember you listened to that one.
Yeah, I did listen to that.
And that was the topic of discussion too. Is how do we make accounting sexy for the younger generation? How do we make them interested in it like they are in everything else? Like accounting has been seen as boring, and it's always just the people that are traditionally like introverted and they don't want that excitement. Those are the ones who come into our profession. But I think if we can make it more attractive to a younger generation, then we're going to have more diversity with our profession. I mean, there's just so much to go on from there. But so keep going. Like
no, so I think that's exactly why I write a book. First of all, like I think initially the target audience is really this bunch of young people who often ask me for career advice because they're like, well, when you think about accounting, there's really taxes and reporting. I mean, no, there's like many other ways you can go and consider. So I realized, I should interview people and put their stories in the book. And so that's not I brought in 20 people to share their journey. And it's really not just talk about career, because so often we think about career as just a career. But no, like we have a personal life. You can't really completely separate your personal life, your passion, your interests, your hobbies away from your professional life. It's almost like when we talk about mentoring, you can't just mentor someone's career. You have to mentor the whole person, right? So I think in the book, we get to know each of the mentors, their story, how they grew up, kind of like we've been talking, right? Like the formative years, like what inspired them, what influenced them, how did they get through all these different obstacles. I think I really wanted to use this book to open up people's eyes and expand their mind to like a completely unique, different universe, a broader universe, what it means to be an accountant. Right? Because I personally got a lot out of it. And I feel like it would be such a shame if the next generations of young kids don't see it. So that's really the mission of the book.
Well, I think we have a shared mission, a shared agenda here, because this is how this show goes. We talk about how people got into accounting, and everybody's story is different. Everybody has a different reason. Everybody has a different angle, and everybody has a different audience that they want to impact. And typically, it's small business owners, or it's something related to something that happened to them. And a lot of people that are in accounting now didn't set out to be in accounting. They didn't set out to be an accountant. It was always something else. Nobody ever really wanted to go into accounting, at least, well, in most cases. And there's always some other factor or something else that happened in their life to realize that this was their path. This is where they were meant to end up.
Yeah.
And I just find it's very interesting because your path is very divergent. It took so many different spokes and different directions, but you ended up writing a book, Dear Accountant. Like that's a pretty impactful title anyway. And were you writing it to yourself in mind? Were you writing it to say, I wish somebody else had written this and given it to me at a younger age?
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, it's definitely something that I wish I had. And I remember when I was reading Chicken Soup for the Soul, right? Because they ended up just have a lot of sequel. They're like Chicken Soup for the Soul for dogs lover, for women, for like whatever, for teachers, like whatever, right? I'm like, where is the one for accountants? Where is it? So 20 years later, still couldn't find it. I'm like, okay, let me write one.
And that's what you wrote.
That's what I wrote. But I really wanted to, this many times, it's so funny, like I thought about, because it's written in a narrative format. So basically when you read each story, it's like the person is telling you their story. So, and I want it to be almost like a letter, like a love letter to accountants, right? It's directly to accountants. Because I feel like, again, it's kind of a little bit of such a shame that a lot of accountants who are working in the field who do great work, which just not, or they're not proud of being accountant. It is such a shame. And I understand, right? But because people usually when you go to all these like CFO meeting, like whatever, people usually recognize like the salespeople. Like how often do you get, recognize what accountants do, right? And so I get it, but I really want people to think deeper about, their contribution, the impact and mission, the purpose of, again, what it means to be an accountant. And I really want them to be proud, because I think it's almost like an energy, like a vibe, right? If everybody accountants, like, you know what I mean? Like, if everybody don't feel the same way, then if you have been in the industry for 2 decades and you just hate your job, not proud of your profession, how do you even promote the profession, right? Let alone now we always wanted to change. I think there's a lot of things that needs to be changed, right? Not to mention, I think the world has changed, but I think many times I think we're still pretty slow. I think there's a group of people who are kind of like yourself, who are a little bit more innovative and creative, but I think majority of it is still pretty slow in change. So
Absolutely,
yeah. So I think we still have a long way to go in the profession.
Well, and change is a good topic. All things considered, change it's so hard for some people. Some people have been set in their ways. They've been doing something the same way for so long that they're afraid of change. They're afraid of, am I going to still be relevant? And is this there's so much that goes into that. Like, we've created our own paradigm, and it took an external factor for me to change a lot of things about me. And that was COVID. That was the need to, there was just so many things that were changing outside of me that forced change internally, and that forced mindset shifts, and then paradigm shifts were happening. So in your case, you started this book before COVID. You started doing this before COVID. So you already started this whole change as a person. Then COVID comes around, and tell me about that. How did that shift?
Yeah, I never really thought too much about it, right? Because I remember when I first started writing a book, it was really just a passion project, right? And people were like, what are you going to do with it?
Passion project.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was just a passion project. And people were like, how are you going to market it? What do you want to do with it? What is the goal? I'm like, well, my goal is if everyone I know, these young kids that I mentor and their friends and family, whatever, whoever I know, would read it, I'll be happy. Right, because again, so many people, so often people come and ask me about career advice. Well, they want me to talk about forensic accounting. I mean, I tell them what I know, but then I always send them to people that I know, right? So I owe a lot of people favor. So I feel like if people can get to know these stories, that's actually enough for me. So that's really what I was thinking. It's a side project, it's a passion project, right? And then COVID hit, a lot of things change, myself included. Like I said, I never in my life thought about I would start a business. I mean, I had a side hustle, but it's very different, right? When you have your full-time job income to pay your bills, the side hustle was just so fun, right? I didn't care, do whatever, anytime, right? But when it become your main source of income, your mindset, everything has to change. I had to become a different person. I feel like sometimes my upbringing or my employee mindset sometimes still hold me back a little bit, right? So there's a lot of adjustment. But I just think it was, I think COVID did that to a lot of people, right? Really forced you to think about your life, which is actually, despite of all these craziness, I still think it was one of the best thing happen. So at the time, so then I was able to do a lot more. I think, when the book published, I told all my friends, some people were very supportive of the book because they see the mission, right? So they help promote their books to people. And then so I got a lot of opportunity to speak and go to, right now, companies too, to speak to young people. Because when you think about a lot of companies, they usually have a budget for leadership development, but not so much for the younger talents, right? Because you think that a couple of years they will leave. Now it's very different. I think it's not so much how long they would stay. I think the most important thing is when they stay there, Did they give you 100%, maybe more? Did you maximize their capacity, what they can do? Or are they just kind of getting by, give you like 20% at minimum, right? So now, I got a lot of opportunity to speak to young people when they first join the accounting firm. So then, it's like, so I usually hire to give them some perspective and to get them excited about being an accountant, right? Because it's really fascinating. There's so many different ways to go. And I, myself included, I felt like, and I saw many people too in the book, that you could have multiple career in a lifetime. And with the accounting skills, it's just going to make you more powerful and unique compared to other people, right? So now I felt like and even I was very excited and inspired seeing kids just light up when they hear all these stories like, oh my God, wow, that changes everything. Because many people, especially many kids, and I could relate when I was younger, right? I was freaking out. When I look ahead, it's like, okay, what's next? You get into Big Four, and then you think about, okay, you become a partner, and then what's next? Right? It's just, again, it's all scripted. It's like, that might not be what I wanted. Yeah, okay. And talk about this generation too. I think they still care about money, but I think they really care about the impact and meaning and purpose, which I think is a great thing.
So I had an episode on purpose recently, and I said, your passion is for you and your purpose is for others. And it sounds like the book was for you. That was your cathartic journey of figuring things out for yourself too. Obviously the book is for others, but the purpose, I feel like that's your podcast and that's your platform. That's the entrepreneur CFO. And that kind of started, I guess, before the book, but I feel like that's, in a way, I mean, correct me if I'm out of turn, but it took you a long time. This has been a long journey, but I feel like now when you say you're just getting started, that's because you finally found that purpose and found what you've been put here for, and you have to go through that. Like, everybody's got to go through that long journey of self-discovery before they really even have an idea. And the purpose has always been there. It's always been within you. The passions are always there too. There's usually more obvious because you can't ignore what you're passionate about. You try to, but usually you can't. And it's always that journey of figuring it out. So,
yeah. Correct
me if I'm wrong, but have you found your purpose?
I think I did. Exactly what you said, right? Spot on. Because I think for the longest time, it's not like I didn't know, but it's because I was pursuing or chasing after something, what I was taught to be success.
You were following that script. You were trying to follow that script.
Exactly.
And it hurts sometimes too. That script may not have been written for you.
Yeah, I didn't know that, right? Because I was like, okay, yeah, I seem to be doing okay. Climb the corporate ladder. All right, let's just keep going. And I sometimes ask myself, it's actually a blessing in disguise, what people call it, right? Like, thank goodness I didn't fit in. If I fit in, I would just continue on. But that might not be what I wanted to do, right? I do really believe that I'm meant to start my business, to own my own thing, which again, in a million years, I could never imagine. And so I don't want to discount all these corporate experience, right? Because I think I did learn a lot, but it might not, I might not have to stay there for 20 years. My God, that was way too long, right? But I did think that I learned a lot out of it, which is now I'm able to use these experiences to help my clients to be better, better serve my clients. So I think it has been a long journey. Right. And then when I think about that question, which is such a great question, right? I did start writing my book before COVID. So why did I do that? Right. And then again, I have been running a side hustle for a decade, and it's exactly what I do now in my business. So I have that has been my passion, on the side, but I was just so afraid. And it's not really that I was afraid. It's just not something that I knew. Right? My parents no,
fear is a good word for it. I think we all have hidden fears and things that we're afraid of that we don't even want to confront. And, we're afraid, we're afraid of two things too. What if I did this full time and I didn't succeed? But then also, what if I did this full time and I did succeed? What am I going to do then? Like, then you have to rewrite. Then you don't have a script. If you succeed in doing something that you're passionate about and you haven't seen anybody do this, then what happens if you succeed? What's next? And maybe there isn't. You don't know what's next, and that's scary too.
Yeah, I think now my mindsets really have completely changed. I used to really just wanted to hold on to that security. But maybe the world has also changed, right? As we spoke about earlier. There's no one that worked for a company for 20 years as much as you want to, right? The pension thing's just like gone. So as long as you wanted to give your loyalties to someone, there's no one to give, right? Like, so, and also I think I used to be so frightened, wanted to hold on to that security, but then I felt like there's really no security, right? And my parents all felt the same way. They still think it's the safest thing to remain working in corporate jobs, right? And so, but at the same time, I feel like I have dealt with enough uncertainty that like I almost now be so comfortable with it. It's okay. Because I'm pretty sure that I've done it so many times now, like I came out okay. I'm pretty sure I will be okay. So I think, a little bit of wisdom come with like being older and, hopefully maturity and all that.
I love that quote. Just wisdom comes through experience too.
Yeah.
Like, nobody's got that unless you've been through it. You can't really learn anything unless you've made mistakes along the way too, and done things not that you regret. I mean, there's a lot of power in doing something that is framed as regretful, but there's no way of learning until you've done that. And there's no way of growing until you've, learned who you are throughout that journey.
Yeah. Well, one of the key themes in the book, when you look at like all these people journeys, I think the common theme and key theme is that a lot of people went through tough times, right? But they just, like a lot of times instantly we're just so frightened. We're like, oh my God, where's the safety net? But in hindsight, in every story, you see people, when you're willing to get out of your comfort zone, be courageous, you always came out so much stronger. I think, like, and I usually, I'm Asian, I'm very practical, right? I hear these things, I like roll my eyes, right? But I can say it that I really believe it because I've done it so many times. This is really how you build your self-worth and confidence. And it's not like, something that you can just keep saying. Like, I understand this mantra thing, right? That you have to keep saying, like, you believe in yourself and all that stuff. Yes, do that, but also take some action, right? So that makes you better.
I love that. Yeah. Got a lot of sage wisdom here, too. So tell me, what's in store in the future here? What's your, you got any new books that you're writing or anything else, anything exciting?
So interesting. I mean, writing a book, it took me 2 years to write Dear Accountant. And I think it's because, I was inexperienced. I had a lot of like detour. If I had to do it again and write the same book, probably a year. It shouldn't take that long, but it took 2 years. So my point is, it actually took me a long time, a lot of effort, and I love it. Because I think, I learned a lot about myself also. Because how often do you sit down and reflect on your own journey, right? So I think it gave me some time to learn about my own journey and then interview all these people. Like, it has 20 people's feature in the book, but I actually interview a lot more. And so I felt like if I had to feature like 100 people, I could, which is why I started the podcast. Not only bring in like interesting, influential people to get their perspectives, but I also wanted to talk.
I feel like I've been writing a book these past 2 years. I just haven't started writing it yet. I've interviewed well over 100 people, so.
Right? Like the content-wise, like it's there. So, yeah, so the podcast, I feel like it's the same idea. There's a lot of things we don't learn in school. We so often talk about mindset, skill set. I think that's especially important as we rise up the rank and become a leader, right? Because so often I think school teach you, to have very strong technical skills just so we can do our job. But then later on, like we were never taught how to navigate all these corporate politics, how to communicate with people, how to manage stress, how to manage You know your own emotions, how to even know how you feel, how to manage time and energy. All that kind of stuff is so important, not just being a professional. But I think you have to take care of yourself first, know yourself, become a better person before. You can't separate your personal and professional life, is what I think. So, that's kind of like what we talk in the podcast. And so I wanted to write a book, and then people gave me all these sort of ideas, like do a Dear Accountant for like different industry. I mean, I want to, if I had, like maybe when I retire, right, make a movie too. How about that? Yeah, and then, so I think there's a lot of projects that I still...
Make a good documentary, I think.
There's really so many things I wanted to do. I feel like it's not, I don't have to wait. I think it's going to be in a couple of years. Like, I don't know yet, but I have a feeling. Like, because right now we're still building our business. But I think, another couple of years when we get to a certain point, we have more time, money, like maybe I'll take on other projects. But right now, so...
Dope.
Huh?
It's pretty exciting. Yeah, it's pretty dope. That's awesome.
Yeah. So right now, I think I'm just focusing on building our business, which is like super exciting. It really just gets me excited every day. And I couldn't say that I could say that in some parts in my career, there actually has been some exciting assignments. But I think owning your business, like something that is fully yours, is just completely different. I don't even know how to describe.
But your excitement is different now than it was before. And if I could kind of summarize, before you were always kind of looking at what were you supposed to be doing? And there was always a what's next, always a what's next. Now you seem very content and satisfied with where you're at and the direction that you're headed, that it's not about what's next, it's about growing what you have.
Yeah.
And continuing to build what you have.
Yeah, and a lot of things like within my control, I can choose, versus there's so many limitations or restrictions in a corporate environment. Like you wanted to go international assignment, like, okay, like, so
but you always have to answer to somebody in those environments.
Exactly.
Who are you answering to here? Your business partner? Like,
no, like myself. No one answers to anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I mean, we're just collaborating. Like, we're just kind of on the same level. So it's, we're building this thing. So I have two other business partners. We've been friends forever. And so we're just building these things together. It's actually so much fun.
Collaboration.
Oh, my God. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Instead of a hierarchy, it's more of a collaboration. And again, you're answering to yourself, which is that's scary for some people too.
Yeah.
For a lot of people, it's really scary to only have to account for yourself. I mean, I'm scared of that in a lot of ways. Right now, I don't feel like I answer to anybody, and I feel more irresponsible, even though, like, to a degree, it's all by design. Everything that I'm doing now was because it was always sort of accidentally on purpose, is a phrase that I use a lot. And right now, I don't really have anybody to answer to yet. I have everybody to answer to. And I'm afraid of that too. I'm afraid that I am more irresponsible than the next person. I mean, my rap name is Little Toddler, and I got a podcast that's like about high school. So I'm very arrested in my development. Like I haven't really grown up much. I act like a kid, and part of me is still scared, just like a kid would be too. So you offered a lot of perspective on this for me, and I appreciate you coming on. This has been dope.
No, thank you so much for having me. Like I said, like I think, the first time we met, like I think you're just so much fun, so cool. And then look at what you guys do. I mean, it's so different, obviously, right? I'm like, what is this Sons of CPAs? What? And then like the graphic is so cute. And then now you guys like becoming Accounting High. I'm like, what is next? Yeah, the rapper thing really got me too. Oh my God, that's so
next? Cool. You like the rap thing? What's next is Accounting U, right? In 4 years, Accounting High is going to graduate high school. We're going to university. So,
oh my God.
I think I have a bit of a plan now. I got an 8-year plan here.
No, it's so much fun. If only accounting could be so much fun 20 years ago, maybe long, like when I was in high school, which is longer. Oh my God, my life could have completely different instead of navigating myself, right? So I think kids today is actually, there's actually a lot of creativity in accounting. Not enough, but there's a lot. but we need more.
Well, it is about finding that balance, and kind of like you said early on,
Yeah.
It lacked creativity. That script lacks creativity. You got to leave room in that script to ad lib and to freestyle. They say that in rap, freestyling, rapping, but but the best conversations are unplanned, unprovoked. At least on my podcast, for sure. Like the best results are always where you leave space for freedom of creativity or just freedom of the mind to go and wander to different places. Anything that's scripted usually has to be well prepared. And I'm just using the analogy of the podcast too, but when it comes to the profession and when it comes to accounting, what are some ways that we can bring more creativity into it?
I think in a corporate environment or any environment, so there's several things comes to mind, right? Instantly, I'm thinking about, work culture, this energy and vibe that we carry with us as accountants, right? Sometimes you look at these, like say, for example, if people look at us, they're like, yeah, they're so cool, right? I want to be that, accounting can be so much fun. So then it's kind of inspire and encourage them to think outside of the box. And it's not just like, do something that has always been done the same way, right? I think people, especially us as experienced professional, almost have a responsibility to be the role model for people in the next generations. And so I think, we're a little bit better now. And I really appreciate people in my book. They're very openly share their ups and downs, how they get to where they are, right? And they also open up their lives as well, because we're really not just one thing. We're not just accountants. A lot of them, they're like an endurance athlete. They ski, they have a side business, they have oh my God, like a million things. So I think when you get to know someone like that, you realize, wow, accountants can be really cool, and they are really cool, right? So I think it inspired the next generation to be more, not just creative, right? Just be more, to be better version of themselves.
So, your nickname, CC, I think of that as being the letter C twice, right? So what would be the two words that you use for the two C words? If you want to summarize this whole thing, I've got a couple that I was going to use, but I want to hear yours.
Oh, wow.
If you were to give me two C words that summarize CC, what would they be?
Curious and courageous.
Ooh. Ooh, I like those. You're the ones I came up with. I love that, curious and courageous, because I didn't come up with either of those. Creative, culture, confidence, CFO, corporate, and chicken soup, which is two words. But
all right.
That's one of them. You could throw Cantonese in there too, but that's two words. Not really. Yeah.
Cool.
That's awesome. All right, Cece, thanks for coming on. Hope I can join you on your show one day too.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. So we are in the process of incorporate the business side of things into my podcast. So we originally talked about to have you on. We kind of paused because, so often I send this clip to my clients. They're like, well, this is for kids, or these are not for kids, right? It's actually for everybody. But, so we kind of want to change that perception and to kind of bring in the entrepreneur, CFO, and the accountant together, and to bring in the content that's kind of suits everybody. That's always a challenge. But yeah, no, I look forward to talk to you. It's going to be so much fun.
That'd be cool, yeah. So for our listeners, how can they find you? How can they find your book? How can they find your podcast?
My book and my podcast are both called Dear Accountant. So we are streamed on all the platforms that you can find podcasts, and also the book is on Amazon. I have a book website called dearaccountantbook.com, but I'm very active on LinkedIn, so connect me there.
Dope. All right, cool. All right, well, thank you, Cece. Appreciate you coming on.
Thank you.